The Mayflower was an iconic boat that brought the Pilgrims to Plymouth Rock. It inspired a nation and numerous pop culture references and its own moving company. But what happened to the ship after it came to America? Did the Pilgrims just chop it up and use it as firewood? Is it a museum somewhere? And what happened to it before it came to America? What is the story of the Mayflower? Well, we're about to find out. The Mayflower was around during the reign of King James I, which was from 1603 to 1625. And during that period, the port books of England record 26 different ships with the name of Mayflower. It was a very popular name, but no one knows exactly why people wanted to name their ships Mayflower at that time.
Here we see the good ship Mayflower, ready to carry to the New World its cargo of hopeful pilgrims.
The name comes from a flower which was called the Mayflower and still is in many areas, although most of the areas refer to this flower as lily of the valley. This was a popular plant back in the 1600s for gardeners to plant in gardens, and it still is today. So this makes it difficult to track the history of the Mayflower before it dropped anchor at the top of Cape Cod on November 21st, 1620.
Land ho! We've arrived in the New World! It's Plymouth Rock! And look over there! Ford Rock and Chevrolet Rock!
The oldest date of this ship existing was 1609, and it was then in the month of August that Christopher Jones, the part owner and master of the Mayflower, took it on a journey from London to Norway and then back to London, and in the bad weather it lost its original anchor.
Hoist the anchor!
Hoist the anchor!
So the original anchor of the Mayflower is somewhere at the bottom of the ocean to this day. The other recorded voyage of the Mayflower was in 1616 when she was on the Thames in England. I always think of the closing credits to Danger Mouse.
Danger Mouse! Danger Mouse!
And the Mayflower was carrying a cargo of wine.
What kind of a booze cruise is this? Where's the hooch?
We Puritans have no place for drunkenness, or colorful clothes, or dreaming, or poetry.
The ship was also used to carry shipments of hats and salt and vinegar to Norway. All of that is before it comes to America in November of 1620.
We've been blown north to the wilderness charted by John Smith, New England.
What shall we do?
Settle here. Make your own colony.
A settlement? All our own? With our own rules?
At that point, Christopher Jones had to spend the next 5 months of his life in the Plymouth settlement.
The Mayflower becomes a hospital ship. When the common house is finally finished, it too becomes a hospital.
Originally, Christopher Jones wanted to get out of there much earlier, but he had a problem. His crewmates were all very sick, and so he needed to stay there until his crew was hardy enough to hit the road again. Now, the Mayflower made excellent time on her voyage back. The winds pushed the ship along. It got there in less than half the time it had taken the ship to go to America. There's a lot of this going on. What am I doing? It got there in less than half the... Doing a cross between like John Madden and Bruce Lee here.
I see we have a new pledge. Mayflower material, I presume?
Huh?
It's a boat. Your ancestors obviously didn't come over on it.
Jones had planned to transport more pilgrims to the New World, but the trip was so difficult he decided that one was all he was doing. He died in March of 1622 at the age of 52. At that point, he had just returned from a different trip on the Mayflower to France. He was buried in the churchyard of St. Mary the Virgin in England, and there's a placard there today noting that he is buried somewhere there in an unmarked grave. So after Jones died in 1622, the Mayflower just sat there in the harbor in the mud, and the ship started to just rot away there in England. The High Court of Admiralty of England looked at the ship and looked at all of its sellable items, not including its timber, and it determined the value of the ship to be 128 pounds, 6 shillings, and 4 pence. This is about $350 US. Now, I don't know if the inflation calculator can be used to determine how much that would be worth today, but I'm assuming it's a lot more than that. Probably double. In 1624, the Mayflower was broken apart by a shipbreaker. That's what they call somebody that breaks apart a ship. Many people believe that that timber from the Mayflower was used in 1625 to build a barn in Jordan's in England that is called the Mayflower Barn. The investigation as to if this barn was truly built out of pieces of the Mayflower is inconclusive, but it is certain that it was built from a 17th century ship. There is a crossbeam that appears to be a piece of evidence. During the voyage to America, a crossbeam was damaged and needed to be repaired.
A great jack screw forces the sprung main beam back into place. There it is secured to the timbers. A post is placed under the main beam to brace it.
This also was a rest of the story by Paul Harvey.
A fractured crossbeam still in the roof of that old barn. A beam that split during a storm at sea. In 1620, the barn was built from the lumber of the Mayflower. And now you know the rest of the story.
I love Paul Harvey.
Mayflower II proudly sails into New York Harbor. Passing the Statue of Liberty, the graceful newcomer enters a port of call never made by the first Mayflower, for the Pilgrims disembarked at Plymouth Rock.
In the mid-1950s, a man in England worked with the Plymouth Plantation in the United States to build a full-size replica of the Mayflower in England and then sail it to the United States. They used the blueprints that existed in America from the original Mayflower, and they did it with hand construction, trying to exactly mirror the methods that were used in the 1600s to build the real one. On April 20th, 1957, it set sail from Plymouth in England and ended up in New York.
What's the name of the ship the Pilgrims sailed to America on?
U-Haul.
The Mayflower II is still there today, but the more common Mayflower that you probably have seen is the Mayflower moving trucks.
There will always be new horizons to cross, new frontiers to explore. Mayflower pioneered coast-to-coast moving. Today we carry households and special cargo all over the world. Wherever you're going, chances are we've already been there.
Mayflower means
Call Mayflower.
That company was founded in Indiana in 1927. Hey, big shout out to everybody on Patreon. I send postcards to everybody on that list. Everybody that signs up for just $3 a month. You get a postcard in the mail from me to you. You could be like Michael and Jessica. You could be like Chris, Matthew Chapin, and my big brother Rob. Thanksgiving is a fun time of year. I hope you're enjoying this time of year. I was recently digging into the presidential turkey pardons. One of the last official acts of JFK was what became the very first presidential turkey pardon. It's a little bit disputed between his and Abraham Lincoln's, which is interesting because there's a lot of parallels between those two men. If you want to watch my video about it, it's right up here. Otherwise, YouTube choose this one, and they said it's best for you. And I have a second channel, almost at 500 subscribers. I hope you become 501. I'll see you next time.